Welcome to Thieves' Cant, a tabletop gaming podcast with your hosts, Jeremy Shane and Chris White.
Welcome in, welcome back to Thieves' Cant, Thursday, March 12th. I'm Jeremy Shane.
And I'm Chris White.
Thank you for listening, for subscribing at thievescantcast, for emailing thievescantcast@gmail.com. Today, another extension on some recent topics we've been discussing as it relates to rules from a bygone era, as we try to resurrect maybe an older style of play. Am I putting this the correct way, Chris?
That sounded really good. Yeah. I might let you do this, I think.
So a few weeks back, we started talking about dungeon turns, using dungeon turns, and that led into a conversation about random encounters, which then led us to talk about reactions. Does that random encounter necessarily mean combat? No, not always. The reaction might determine something else. But if it does turn into combat, how long does that combat need to last? Is it simply a battle of attrition? First one to 0 hit points loses? Or is there another element that we need to introduce into play to change up the flavor somewhat? We're talking morale.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I was thinking about morale, I was preparing for this episode, and I started thinking about the Serengeti, which is probably weird. But I was watching a nature video, and it was this pack of lions that had taken down a dangerous prey animal, right? I mean, and everybody's all in. It's like 3 or 4 of these lions, and
Group hunt.
Yeah, group hunt, and they are, but I mean, it's high risk, right? I mean, this thing's kicking, and it could break a jaw or break a leg, I mean, but they take it down, and they're just starting to dig into the meal, right? And all of a sudden, these hyenas show up. It's like 20 of these hyenas surrounding them, and these things are nasty, and they're doing their crazy hyena laugh, and they're surrounding the lions and all this. These lions are tough, right? But they had to cut and run. They had to let the meal go. Abandon the meal.
Their prey.
Right.
Oh.
Because they realized they were outnumbered, and this was a fight they couldn't win. And I thought about that, and it's interesting how often we don't get this right when we're playing a tabletop RPG, right? Because like you said, every battle so often turns into a fight to the death, and we put our sacks of hit points on the table and see who runs out first.
Yeah, this is so ingrained in the way that we play that Draw Steel in its rules explicitly has to state, look, sometimes the enemy is going to want to run away.
Right.
And if they do, you need to tell your players, it's running away. It will never bother you again. Players never want to let anything run away.
Right. And I don't know that that's always the way, because I think there's a lot that you have to take into consideration with morale.
Yeah.
I really feel like in dungeons, random encounters are, man, I really feel like that mechanic is almost a necessity at this point. With morale, you just need to be aware you are adding complications to your game. It is easier to just run every fight to 0 hit points and call it a day.
And there are certainly adversaries who will have that mindset.
Right.
We're not talking about those adversaries that are going to fight to the death.
Right.
The
undead.
The undead who are just mindless undead. The raging orcs who are, ready to die for Grumpsh.
Yeah.
If they can't take you out, then they'll die trying.
Yeah.
It's decided. We're not talking about those groups.
No, those are the honey badgers, right?
Yeah.
They never back down from a fight.
Yeah, we've said before, the only time you would want to make a roll like this is if there's a question of the outcome.
Yep.
If you're not certain, that's where this comes in.
That's right. And I don't think a role like this should ever be applied to the players. The players have their own brains. They make their own decisions. And retreat should certainly be a tactical choice.
It's an option.
Yeah, but this is specifically for the creatures and the NPCs that you encounter, right? And a lot of times, I mean, again, you can look at historical battles, and this was so often the case. One part of the line would start to break, and it's like this domino effect, right? Like all of a sudden now everybody's falling back, and now we're in, this full-blown withdrawal.
Panic starts to set in.
Right. And so it makes sense, a lot of sense, and it's going to make your combats make more sense too. This is a dynamic that's it's logical, right? I mean, those little goblins, are they famous for their heroism? Not really. So why are they fighting to the death against a superior opponent?
Right.
And I think step one is, and I'm not pulling from any specific game, because there's like old school games. D&D handles this differently with optional rules. I know one idea, I believe this is a D&D one, is to actually have a morale roll before combat.
Okay.
Now, I think the monster should make that decision. Like, that should be a conscious decision, not necessarily a morale roll, right? Because if you're the group of goblins and these are 7th level adventurers, you can tell they're capable and they're dangerous. So maybe you don't engage at all, right? That's a conscious decision. In thinking about that part, I do kind of like the idea of a morale roll just to have an early disposition. Like, basically, are we kind of a little shaky on this, or or we feel good about it?
Okay, let me ask then, since we're talking determining general disposition, why would this be a morale roll and not a reaction roll?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think as far as the reaction roll goes, that's the disposition of the encounter as far as, are we friendly? Are we hostile?
Okay.
Are we curious? In that regard. For the morale roll is always related to combat. So this is specifically like, how do I know I hate that guy, but can I take him? That's kind of the question, right? You have to take that into consideration. Yeah. So that's again, very optional. And a DM can determine that, but I do think it's kind of interesting, the idea of, do we feel good about this? Maybe there's a little modifier attached to it. Then going forward, generally there are triggers within the combat. So things happen, okay? One of the biggest ones is obviously getting bloodied, right? Or maybe taking a critical hit. Maybe you take one big hit and you're like, whoa, this might not be what I want.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then whatever system you're using, it may be a 2d6 roll off a table, or it may be, I think D&D uses like a D20 plus wisdom, which was interesting. Like, it's an interesting choice, because it's like, would your wisdom make you less likely to retreat? Because it might be wisdom that tells you this is not the fight you want.
Right.
So I don't know, but either way, you're going to make some type of roll there for that creature to determine if they're going to attempt to either, and fleeing is an option. It's not the only option.
Right.
You could try to parlay. You could
throw down your weapons and say, hey, let's talk.
Right.
Right.
So it's situational. It depends on the creature. So you're going to make that roll. Or again, whatever the trigger is. Or it may be, let's just take a moment to talk about like a powerful leader, because this could have a huge impact, right? Maybe the goblins on their own wouldn't take off and run, right? Like, oh my gosh, that guy hit me hard, I'm running. But he ran, I might run too, right?
Sure, that sense of panic setting in.
Right, it could be a trigger. However, if they've got that hobgoblin over there driving him,
Stinktooth,
yes, old Stinktooth, he might be scarier than the people trying to kill him right now, because they might know what happens if they make him mad. So that might keep them in the fight. So I think you could put modifiers in there. Yeah. If you have a very charismatic leader or a feared leader, then you could definitely do that.
Okay. Are these things that you think about and prep somehow in advance, or is this something simple enough that you just handle it in the moment on the fly?
I would probably handle it on the fly. I would take all those things into consideration. And so I might throw a few modifiers on it. You could certainly think about it like, hey, this hobgoblin gives a +2 to the morale of any ally that he has because they're scared of him, right? He's intimidating. Or maybe this mercenary group has an inspiring leader that gives them a bonus. Or maybe you could go the other way. Maybe they have a cowardly leader. They don't trust him. And now they don't feel good about things. They break easier.
Okay.
So you could take all that into consideration. And I know with the old school, they have a lot of tables that, specify the type of individual. We talked about you've got your cowardly cheetahs, you got your honey badgers, right? So a berserker is going to have it may not be possible for them to miss that morale. You may not even need a morale roll for some of them. An average guardsman, yeah, probably a lot lower. And so you need to take that into consideration too, is who's making that roll. Another trigger I found interesting was fear effects. I think that's a great idea for a time for a morale roll because, you may roll and you run away for one round, right? That may be the fear effect. But that's a great trigger because I'm if somebody scares me, for whatever reason, magically or whatever, I might just keep going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This might just be a good time to continue on. So I think that's another
I've
great
run
trigger.
this far.
Yeah. And you can think of it's just common sense. Like what would break this creature? What would be enough for them to start thinking, I should run? I mean, I think really as a DM, you're kind of put yourself in the mind of the creature anyway, right? If it's a mindless thing, it's just going to be lashing out, right? But if it's intelligent, it's going to weigh its odds. The creatures want to live.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
If you're a demon and you know that if you get killed here, you just go back to the abyss, who cares, right? I mean, it's basically just training, right? So no big deal. It's a simulation essentially. But if you're a kobold and this is it, like you're going to have to weigh your options. Think about a dragon. A dragon out in the middle of the woods that's fighting a party of adventurers. Are you serious? Like, I'm not going to risk
like this.
No way. I'm taking off.
I can fly.
Right.
I've got
exactly.
a horde to get to.
Well, exactly. Now, what if they follow me back to the horde? Well, now this is my loot. So maybe at this point, I'm like, you all ain't getting this, right? So maybe I dig in a little harder, Yeah. And so then it depends on the dragon. How greedy are they? They're going to have to make that decision. Yeah. So a lot of morale is common sense with a roll to accompany it. Right. And so this is part
with some circumstance factored in.
Sure. And it's part of that same idea of the game running itself to some extent. And you just, throwing those circumstances and common sense on top of it. And I think morale is big because it really changes the way players approach every confrontation. Just like, we had with reactions. Morale makes a big difference. If you can break an enemy and they take off running and that fight's over, you just saved resources, right? Instead of having to fight 3 more rounds to whittle them down.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Maybe at that point, maybe it's worth somebody using an intimidation type of skill. Maybe it's like, I'm going to devote my round to, screaming and ripping at my clothes and looking crazy, right? And scare them. So, and then the other thing is, and this is really, what do you do with them when they run or when they take off or if they try to negotiate?
Yeah. We just said that, at the top that draw steel says if they run, the players need to know that they're running, it's over.
Right.
The encounter is done if they run.
Mm-hmm.
But not all games have that baked in.
Right. And I think that's good, especially for like an overland encounter. It doesn't make sense in some places. Like if you're in the goblin the goblin delve, their tunnels, their homes or whatever, they may not necessarily have a place to run to. And the first place they're going to go is more goblins. But think about that for a minute. Maybe they get reinforcements and come back stronger. But maybe they're like, death is coming and we got to get out of here, right? So it may actually negatively affect the morale of the ones that ran away, right? And everyone they talked to, because now they're telling everybody how bad you are, right? You're, like tore us asunder. Jimmy got ripped in two. And Jimmy, he was a pretty tough guy, right? So, yeah, I think it's a dynamic. But again, this is where I say morale does complicate things, because it's not just, rock'em sock'em robots where these two are going head to head. Like, now there's things you're going to have to think about. Like, how is that, that town guard that took off and ran, how is he going to react to this? And how are the people he talks to going to react to it? Yeah. So,
last question that I have, and it probably should have been the first. You mentioned that this roll, some systems it might be a 2d6, 5e it might be a d20 with a modifier. What does the morale roll consist of? Are you trying to hit a target number? Do you have a morale score? Like mechanically?
Yeah.
What does this look like?
Generally, you're going to have a morale score in mind. I know, like with a lot of the OSR stuff, for example, they have a table where it's just talking about like mercenary morale, and it's a list. So it's 2d6. Like untrained militia, they're a 6. Fanatics or berserkers, they actually have a much higher bonus.
You're rolling to find out what their morale is. You're not making a roll against. It's not like a morale check.
It is a check. Yes. So you're going to make it like a 2d6 roll, and you're going to compare that roll to the monster that's going to have a score. They're going to have a morale score.
Gotcha.
Right? So that should be baked in. So if the system you're playing with doesn't have that morale score, you will need to figure that out. I would want to have that beforehand.
That's some homework you need to do in advance.
Right. Okay. And then just off to the side, circumstance may modify that a little bit.
Yeah. So that's morale. How do you implement it in your game? Let us know. thievescantcast@gmail.com. You can comment below as well. I, for one, failed my morale roll, and so I got to go.
I'm just going to surrender. I'm just going to lay here and cry.
We will see you tomorrow to wrap up the week. It's Friday the 13th tomorrow, so we're going to talk some gaming superstitions.
Ooh, spooky.
We'll see you then. I'm Jeremy Shane.
And I'm Chris White.
It's been Thieves Cant. Thanks for listening. So long.
Thank you for listening to Thieves Cant. Email thievescantcast@gmail.com.